Good evening, Brendan Corrigan.
Oliver Pritchard, how are you? And que frío, no, esta noche, huh?
That's why I've got my jumper on, my friend. That's why I've got my jumper on.
I've a long sleeve shirt on, which is a rarity for Brendan Corrigan. I'm usually in some sort of a polo top or a sports top, actually. But yeah, kind of making a joke about the weather because we are going to be talking about that a little bit later. But in fairness, bit of a cold night, though, isn't it, compared to the previous ones?
It's a little chilly.
It is, yeah. Well, maybe it's worse up here in the north, but I have heard que frio uttered on about 6 occasions so far. This evening.
But we'll talk about that later. But frankly, I hear "Hue puta frio" when it's anything less than about 15 degrees. So we'll see.
Well, yeah, as we said, but we are going to get to that because while there are many areas of contestation over what makes or breaks Bogotá as a city to live in, one of the most common is something the capital has little control over, in fairness, the weather. So yes, as we've well alluded to, on tonight's Bogotá Nights, Colombia's only live and interactive English language chat show, we've our thermostats at the ready to gauge the mood of the masses as regards Bogotá's weather. Is your outlook on the sunny side, a pleasant 19 degrees without a threatening rain cloud in sight, or does Bogotá's weather leave you feeling as cold as those infamous November rains that invariably turn into skin-piercing hailstorms? And Ollie has a story or two about that. Whether you have stories of weather woes or you feel Bogotá is Colombia's Goldilocks location, just right, we want to hear from you. Basically, is Bogotá simply too grey or is it quite okay? I'm a poet. Send us your comments right now by using the live message facility, and your messages will appear here on the screen. Or if you happen to be watching this recorded, you can still get involved by commenting on where you're viewing or via tweet, the handle being at Bogotá Post, everybody's favourite English language newspaper in Colombia, and our hashtag Bogotá Nights, the name of this programme. This show is all about viewer interaction. After all, we want to hear your thoughts. The weather forecast is to come just after 9:30, but it's our news review first, and shortly we'll be analysing the latest announcement of an easing of coronavirus containment measures that are due to come into effect in less than 2 weeks. Before that, Ollie, we thought we might be opening up tonight with news of another disruptive day of protests in the ongoing national strike, or Paro Nacional. But in the end, it seemed yesterday was a bit of a non-event, here in the capital anyway. Is it a case of the protesters just briefly returning to the trenches, or have they had enough for the time being?
It's so hard to know, really, Brendan, exactly what's going on. Like you say, it's absolutely possible. They did announce that yesterday and today would both be strike days. Now, Wednesday's passed and, yeah, very little happened. Will that be the same again tomorrow? Or is tomorrow going to be the real protest? Very, very hard to know. It's worth pointing out that it's very localized. So there's nothing happening in the center of Bogotá yesterday, but Usme and Portal Americas both have had heavy disruption and prolonged and sustained clashes between protesters and the riot police ESMAD.
Yeah, and of course, we're guilty of, okay, the show is Bogotá Nights, and both of us here are in Bogotá at different ends of it. But in other regions of the country, we're still having quite severe problems. I mean, we saw this week in Tuluá, the courthouse being burnt to the ground. Now, again, Tuluá has had ongoing problems for years, of course, but in this chaos and uncertainty, I guess it's allowing people who may have been wishing to do such an act for a long time, giving them the space to do it. And then there are still the problems in Valle de Cauca, of course, Cali being the capital there. So it's still happening in other areas. It's just here in Bogotá things seem to have quietened down. And as you said, maybe tomorrow we will get a reaction.
Yeah, and actually not just Bogotá. I'd say it's largely calmed down or become more localized in most big cities now. Obviously, as you say, the one massive exception is Valle de Cauca in general. So we're not only talking about Cali, but also Buenaventura, notably, has really started to kick off. Jumbo as well, Popayan, obviously, over the border in Cauca. So it's that region which, again, historically has been very violent, has had a lot of problems, and has a lot of, as you say, a lot of systematic underlying root cause problems. It may well be that there's people out there who have felt like this for a long time, and now is their chance to express it.
Yeah, and of course we have to mention as well that in Cali on Tuesday there was this March of Silence, as it was called. Those calling for an end to the blockades, the roadblocks. So that means obviously they're having shortage of supplies and of essential needs. So there's that element to it too, that are kind of people getting tired. And obviously down there it is far more intense than it is here. Like we talked maybe a couple of weeks ago about shelves being a little bit bare in certain aspects here, but now everything just seems more or less back to normal, with a few exceptions. And I guess it's important to mention this, that there were some rather worrying, well, more than rather worrying, but of taking over or stopping ambulances, and then we did end up with a young child dying because he didn't get to hospital in time. So there's those elements, as you said, that are happening in certain sectors of Bogotá. So it's not exactly that everything's just gone away and it's business as usual.
Yeah, and the big question, it's interesting that you mentioned the Cali March of Silence. There is a really big question here about where public sympathy is. And that's really not clear. You know, we talked about this last week. I believe it's still true that people support the aims of the protesters, or at least that the root causes of much of the protest haven't been solved and aren't going away soon. So that's going to keep on bubbling for a while. You know, you asked, your initial question was all about whether or not this was an end, or whether it's going to recover energy and come back. Definitely, they're going to come back in the long future. As for the short-term future, very, very hard to know.
Yeah, I guess. Well, tomorrow might give us a little bit of an indicator. If we get 2 consecutive planned March days in Bogotá, anyway, that are very quiet, then I think that might indicate that we're kind of in a little bit of a lull period, and we'll see what happens. Now, you did raise an interesting point, though, when we were talking about this earlier, that like we still don't really have anything concrete in terms of, you know, what might happen. That if the government are going to say, okay, we're going to grant reform here, we're going to bring in this measure, etc., etc. But you said kind of an easy way out for some, not even audacious politician, but somebody who might be thinking with a view to 2022 and the presidential elections or whatever, is to put a bill before Congress of reducing politicians' pay. It'll be almost a no-brainer, because you were saying you'd be a fool to vote against it. Yeah.
I mean, that's absolutely. I mean, the devil is in the detail. I think that's the key with that one. The only real difficulty is, okay, you think congressional salaries are too high. They're soaring well over 30 million now. Okay, great, fine, good, cool. So what's the magic number? What do you want to reduce them to? Do you want to reduce them to 30 on the nose, 20, 25? Less than 20, you know, what's your magic number going to be? And if you can't put a magic number on it, that's going to be tricky, because I think what you could well have is that, you know, let's say somebody like Gustavo Bolivar, perfect person to introduce a bill like this. You know, he's fairly safe for re-election. He doesn't have to build consensus with anybody in the Senate. So he's in quite a luxurious position in that respect. He could bring it in. Let's say he says, okay, we're going to cut salary of Congress, of senators, by a third. Okay, let's bring it down to 24 million a month. I think what you'll have is a lot of people saying, oh, still 24 million too much. I think that's the problem you'll have more than anything else. In terms of voting for it, yeah, look, nobody in the Senate, absolutely nobody in the Senate could oppose that. If you say, look, let's slash congressional salaries, absolutely, no one's going to take that risk because, Brendan, if you say, I support these salaries, and you make that vote, let's say by October, November next year, if you're opposing a reduction in salaries, you're not picking up any votes in March. None. I mean, some people will get back in because of the guaranteed representation, the way that the seats work, because if enough people vote for the party, then just they get a free seat basically. But in terms of voting directly for that person, it's not going to happen. Absolutely no. You would not go anywhere near. I mean, that is such a toxic thing to oppose. I mean, it's one thing, as we saw today, there won't be any action taken against Milano, the Secretary of Defence. The Ministry of Defence. There won't be any action taken against him. That's fairly toxic, and it's fairly vote losing. And there's already memes going around saying, "Look, these are the people who supported it, and these are the people who opposed it." But that's nowhere near as toxic as congressional pay, which is hated.
Yeah. But you raised the point, and I'd be interested to get viewers' opinion on this. Like, where do you set the marker? I mean, do you tie it to a multiple of minimum wage? But as you said when we were chatting about this, planning this program, that then you double minimum wage, and then you have to double their salary or whatever.
That would be popular.
So it becomes tricky. Like, what do you set it at, or do you kind of look at international best practice and kind of, I don't know, gauge it on what the average expense is in a country and then multiply it by that or whatever? It's a difficult one, but certainly like to the layperson and to a very modest living man like myself, 36 million pesos a month just seems ludicrous in this country. Ludicrous.
And Richard Stoller there immediately with a comment absolutely hits another nail on the head. Congressional pensions are more annoying. Yeah, absolutely. And in many ways more annoying just because they don't go away for, decades and then get passed on to, widows and, beneficiaries and so forth. Absolutely ludicrous. And there's not much you can do about that. You can slash pay in the short term. I mean, it's very difficult to start slashing pensions just because you're setting a precedent, which is, very worrying.
It brings to mind, though, a phrase, Ollie, reforma tributaria. How about that?
Yeah, well, no one wants to pay, do they?
But
actually, I mean, but that's part of it, isn't it? I mean, one of the reasons congressional pay could be, could and in some ways should be slashed is because, look, economically, it doesn't really matter, does it? We can pay senators what we want. There's just so few of them, it doesn't really matter. But in terms of how it looks, in terms of sort of giving an example for the rest of society, in terms of saying with some justification at least, we're all in the same storm, even if we have slightly different votes, I think in that respect it's extremely powerful.
Yeah, exactly. It's the symbolism of it, as you said. I mean, not all in the same boat, but all suffering the same storm, so to put it. And Richard's mentioned, of course, that in terms of pensions, it's a bit of a gravy train. You get in for a month as a suplente or whatever in Propiedad. You can explain that one in greater detail, but I think I know what you mean. And then you have a pension for life.
Can I point out, by the way, my grandfather was a member of Parliament in England, served 9 years in the House of Parliament, and never received an MP's pension.
Wow. Maybe
10 years is the minimum.
Okay.
10 years is the minimum, and the elections were called early.
Not sure what it's like in Ireland. I'm sure Ireland is worse, that you only have to serve probably something similar to Colombia and you get your pension. I mean, I did come up with an idea that like you set the salary at X amount for just coming back to salaries, and then it goes on a sliding scale downwards. That like if you go for re-election, because your commitment to the cause, So okay, you get paid fairly well for your first term, but then if you get re-elected, it goes down. But anyway, look, I think smarter people, I'll speak for myself, smarter people than me will have to be looking into this, but we'll see what happens. Sticking kind of with the protest though, Ollie, there was a lovely cover on everybody's favourite current affairs magazine and my kind of former parish, although I never got paid from them. Vicky Davila owes me money. Samana had an interesting editorial that you have a few bones to pick with on that.
Yeah, look, this is absolute nonsense. For anyone who hasn't seen it, it's got a kind of Petro with half his face in some kind of zombie situation. And it says, enough already, Gustavo.
Basta ya.
Exactly. Gustavo Petro is the protagonist of this of these protests, of these strikes. He's causing chaos, he's causing trouble, blah, blah, blah. Now, listen, Vicky Davila doesn't share the same politics as I do, and I don't think that's a terribly bad thing. And I don't think it's awful that Samana has an identifiable political position. I think, to be honest, most media organisations in the world do, don't they? However, I think there's a limit to where you leave reality. And if you're saying that you honestly consider Gustavo Petro to be the main protagonist of these events, these protests, these strikes, then you're just not paying attention. You're telling your readers that you either know nothing about Colombian politics, or you're so cynical that you're prepared to completely ignore the truth, in order to drive your point. It looks scarily close to propaganda, if that's the case. Look, Gustavo Petro turned up for the first time on these demonstrations at the end of last week. He has nothing to do with it. Meme after meme is saying, no soy uribista ni petrista, and so on and so forth. Police violence. Look, come on. Are you telling me that Gustavo Petro is perpetuating police violence? Come on. This is ludicrous and it's laughable. And frankly, I've defended Vicky Davila before, and I think some of the criticism she gets is unfair and unwarranted. And I don't mind populism in news. I think it does have a place, and I think it's silly to ignore that, and very elitist. But come on, there's a limit here.
Yeah, I guess she could say that she could have gone on the line that this is a leftist movement, which Petro obviously is kind of seen as the head of that leftist movement. Yeah, but that he's coordinating the whole affair. Yeah, is a little bit more, as you said, unbelievable. But she is playing to a particular gallery, of course, and there'll be many who will say, yeah, she's right there, or Samana is right on that one, or certainly won't be questioning it as much as you or I are.
Yeah, and of course it will fossilise. Look, we can say, oh, well, everybody knows what Samana is. But I think there are actually people that do still take the name Samana seriously. And that's sad. I think it's sad.
This was flagged when Vicky took the helm that it was going to go in a certain direction, and a number of high-profile departures as well. But anyway, I guess we'll see what happens with that one, and the Colombian electorate will have their say in 2022 on all of this. Remember that day is coming. D-Day is on its way. Quick one though, we talk about kind of this administration kind of making one mistake after another, and one thing that caught my eye was the initial refusal to allow in the International Court of Human Rights observers, and then flip-flop to say, oh yeah, they can come in. Okay, they either say no, they can't come in for X reasons, and then they stick to that decision, or they let them in. But they, again, make another mess of it.
And again, we talked earlier about optics. It looks bad, doesn't it? Because now everybody believes that they've been denied. So you've got all the negative publicity anyway.
Yeah, and of course, because there was one from Argentina or something who flew in out of a group of 20 who apparently was denied entry for whatever reasons. And reading Migración Colombia's press release, it was, in fairness, I'm going to get into trouble here, but I have witnessed a few Argentinians in Migración Colombia getting quite hot-headed when things don't go their way. And they were saying that this Argentinian, his behavior towards the migration official when a few things were questioned on his passport or whatever, that also led so that the situation escalated and therefore he was denied entry, but the rest of the team were allowed in. But anyway, just another thing. Right, Ollie, kind of positive news to talk about now, though. As I mentioned briefly in the intro, Bogotá's opening up. It's kind of going to be more or less business as usual. Now, some people will say it's been like that anyway for the last 2 or 3 weeks, but our beloved mayor, Claudia Lopez, came back from her 2 weeks of isolation and recovering from COVID herself, and it seems like she's had an enlightenment or whatever and has come back and said, right, guys, the best way forward now is to open up the city. So what can we expect in less than 2 weeks' time? What's happening?
Well, 10 days, let's say. We can, so just a little bit of animal disruption here. No, dogs, leave her alone. Right. So there's been, ¿dónde vas? There's been a little...
Where else would you get it, guys? Bogotá Nights, live with animals as well.
Sorry, where were we? Yes. So there's small changes. It's mainly for bars and sort of nightlife in general. We can say so. Gastropubs, bars, restaurants, etc. I mean, of course, nobody had heard of gastropubs until the pandemic. But yeah, they can open now until, or they will be able to open until 1 a.m., which is a massive difference from 10. I suppose it is actually, isn't it? It's 3 hours. Of course, a lot of places in Bogotá don't stay open past midnight. I mean, 11 midnight. So certainly not midweek anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So we'll see. We'll see how that plays out. Apart from that, I don't see. I mean, I was a bit confused when I saw this press release. I kind of thought, okay, but what is closed at the moment? What can I not do? There doesn't seem to be very much right now that I can't do. We talk about the curfew. Look, I can guarantee when I take my dogs out at the end of the night for their toilet, there'll be people strolling about on the street past 11. I am positive of that because there have been every single night for the past, 2 years, pandemic or no. So yeah, I mean, a lot of this is kind of on paper, I think, but it is a big fillip for the nightlife, and it's also a big shout out to schools and universities who've got full opening coming for high schools, and universities.
And maybe a huge relief, because I've been experiencing this in my new abode of hard-pressed parents having to, sit down with their
exactly
offspring, for virtual schooling or whatever, and inadequate perhaps virtual schooling, and for those same kids to meet up with their friends again and just live normal lives as young children should, I guess. Go to school, play in the schoolyard, and do all that kind of stuff.
I think it's like many things, isn't it? Look, some kids will have enjoyed the lockdown period, staying away from bullies, that sort of thing. Other students won't have liked it. 6 or 1, half dozen the other, I suspect.
Yeah. By the way, just Claudia's enforced absence, obviously, with her COVID infection. As you had mentioned earlier, not a bad time to be away for those 2 weeks when Bogotá was under a bit of chaos and stuff.
Good timing for her.
Yeah, so she's a bit more relaxed. Well, Ollie, I'm going to, because we're kind of getting close to 9:30, and remember, guys, we're going to be talking about Bogotá weather and all the joys and the woes, the wonders and the woes of Bogotá's weather. We want to hear your weather stories. as well. So do get writing to us, and anything, of course, on what we've discussed so far. We like to get your comments. But before that, we have to mention Egan Bernal, Ollie, because now I'm not a cycling expert. You know more about the sport than I do. But am I tempting fate by saying he's a shoo-in to win the Giro Italia?
More or less, yeah. He's in a very. I mean, it's in his hands basically. It looks very unlikely that anybody can attack him in any serious way. He just needs to hold everything together and not have any, crazy situations in the last 2 days. By which I mean, avoid mechanicals. Hope the weather stays okay and something really weird doesn't happen. Not crash. Again, that'll be very weather dependent, and so on and so forth. Other than that, he should be fine.
Tomorrow would probably be the key day. That if he gets through tomorrow with his lead intact, then it's probably
he's not the world's best time trialer, but he's also far from being terrible. He should be able to do enough. I can't see Yates making 2.5 minutes up on him. Seems unlikely.
Okay, we'll watch that space. By the way, we said, guys, we want to get your comments. Felipe, I'll take a hug from anybody this weather. Thanks very much for that, Abrazo, Brendan. Cheers. Quick thing I want to mention on sport, because I just saw it in the Blue Radio headlines, that Liga Betplay, the Colombian Football Association heads, have said that they're hoping on the 2nd of June, so the week, midweek of next week, 2nd of June would be like Wednesday, if I'm correct, that they'll be able to get the first semi-finals of the Liga Betplay, which of course have been in suspension due to the national protests. But there's one outstanding leg in the quarterfinals, and that's Tolima and Deportivo Cali, which will be played in Medellin this weekend. Daniel Quintero, the mayor of Medellin, has given the green light for that game to go ahead there, with Tolima with 1 foot in the semi-finals. They're 3-0 up. Junior Millonarios, come on Millos, the other semi-final, La Equidad, are awaiting the winner of Tolima Deportiva Cali. Ollie, an Irishman and an Englishman walked into a bar, and the first topic of conversation was the weather. We're going to talk about... It's something we don't talk about enough on this, but now we're devoting half an hour to Bogota's wonderful weather. I guess both of us are voting with our feet. We've been here for a decade, more or less, both of us, so people will know where we kind of come from. If we hated it and hated the weather that much, we still wouldn't be here. But I guess if there are people who are listening from outside and they kind of go, well, Brendan and Ollie, they live in Colombia, it's the tropics, so obviously they're getting sun every day if they're outside, so they'll come back well tanned, or at least with a bit
what are you
redder
doing
in the
there with
face.
a jumper on? It must be 30 degrees, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. The weather here, though, Ollie, why is it not that way?
Well, because we're extremely high up for a start. We're very close to the equator. We're 5 or 6 degrees north, but yeah, we are incredibly high. We're 2.5 kilometers up in the sky, which doesn't help. And then, of course, we've got these hills. We've got a big flat savanna out there, and we're equatorial. So there's lots of factors coming together.
Yeah, so there you go. That's it, more or less in a nutshell. That's why we don't get the 30-degree weather. Although Richard, our resident historian, we must invent or produce Bogotá Nights badges, and we'll send out a Bogotá Nights badge to Richard for all his comments. But he was saying apparently the late US historian David Bushnell told him that it was colder in the 1950s with frosts in the morning. But yeah, I guess what he's saying is you got 1 million people back then compared to 10 million and growing, exactly. Yeah, so and all obviously a lot more vehicles, so all the carbon that's being emitted around.
And that's exactly what I've heard from pretty much every person that I know in Colombia has said exactly the same thing.
Yeah, well, population number one, and then of course everything else that comes with that. So as I said, the vehicles, and also just more concrete, so there's less vegetation there, so that might also play
the old heat islands, yeah.
Yeah, so Yeah, interesting. I mean, to be honest, though, and we were joking at the start. Like tonight is relatively cold, and it rained. I don't know if it rained down your side of the city today, but
Yeah.
we did have fairly heavy rain. And now, like, it's seldom that I really do feel the cold. Like I'll kind of maybe put on a jacket, whatever. But if I'm walking relatively fast, and then I'm kind of going, no, I'm usually okay in a t-shirt. But tonight, on my way back, I was out for a long walk up the hills around El Codito and came back, and I noticed the chill in the air. Although my computer is telling me it's 12 degrees Celsius, so it's not that cold, really.
Yeah.
But
What weather station is it taking that from?
I don't know. I'll have to check it, and that would take me a long time, I guess. Well, what's it saying on my phone? But anyway, but yeah. So weather stories, guys, as well, because we have a few of them, and one thing that I guess when we talk about the seasons are what you can expect at various times of the year. So if you were to come, for example, to Bogota in October, November, I can understand then that you will probably go, I don't want to ever return to Bogota. There are surely better places to live.
Well, but that's the thing, isn't it? It drives me insane when people say, "Oh, in Bogota we don't have any seasons," and I kind of go, "You don't have sort of spring, summer, autumn, winter. No, not exactly. But don't tell me there's not a rainy season. Surely everybody in Bogota knows there's a very clear a pair of rainy seasons."
Well, of course. Now, but you could also question: do they prepare adequately? And I'll talk about myself here because it's like I have the memory of a goldfish. I mean, I know it's coming. I know that the rainy season is coming, but every time then, when it comes, I go, "Oh, I should have got a pair of Wellington boots. I should have got proper waterproof gear," and I never have it. And then I kind of get through the awkward days when you do have that rainy season, and some are worse than others, obviously, some years worse than others, and then kind of the sun comes back and I go about my jolly business and don't bother to buy those pair of Wellington boots. But if you're coming to Bogota, it's your first year or whatever, and you're going to be here for a couple of years, it wouldn't be, and you're going to be moving about a lot, or you like to get out and about regardless of the weather. Then,
but also, I'd say even if you're not getting out and about, look, not having a raincoat in this city is insane, I think.
Oh yeah, of course. You need. Now I do have an all-purpose poncho, an impermeable poncho, which you see. This is the other thing. Some Bogotanos, they're too fashion conscious, so I don't think they like to put on all this wet gear that might take away from them looking good or whatever with their fancy clothes. And they're fancy runners. They like, shoes are a big thing here. So maybe that's another factor into why they don't want to get all this wet gear. Because whenever I put on this big poncho, which is a great job, there's a few holes in it now, so that's obviously not making it worse. But people kind of laugh at me. They call me El Pitufo, the Smurf.
But surely hang on, whoa. Surely being a Smurf would mean that you had like a little pair of white shorts on, wouldn't it? And like a little hat and walking around otherwise bare-chested.
Just I guess being all in blue, or maybe that girl in Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory who ate the blueberry thing, was it?
Violet.
Yeah, there you go. But anyway, so it's like maybe there's this thing that people don't like to, because it's amazing how many residents here, people who have lived in this city all their lives, don't seem prepared for the heavy rains that come.
Or even just the cold. I mean, I find myself often going out with, going out for, let's say, a drink with somebody. So many times this has happened to me. And, we arrive at a bar, let's say it's a little bit early, so it's 5 o'clock. We arrive at a bar and it's a nice sunny day. We arrive at a bar, it's 15 degrees, something like that. And I've got my coat, big thick coat over my arm. You go, oh, ha, why have you got a big, thick coat? Because it's sunny now, but in, in 2 or 3 hours when we finish drinking, it will be cold and dark. We're going to go, oh yeah, good point. Oh, didn't you bring a jacket? No. And I just think, but surely you would have planned ahead, wouldn't you? And thought, isn't that... I mean, I'm amazed by the amount of people that look out of the door and go, oh, the sun's shining, I don't need a rain jacket. I look out of the door the window in Bogotá, and I instantly think, if the sun's shining, I'm getting all my wet gear. If it's raining, I think to myself, make sure I've got sunglasses and sun cream.
Yeah, that's true. You got to be thinking of what's coming next, and it is so changeable. Especially because, in fairness, the one thing that you can bank on for October and November is that you will always get heavy rain. It'll be seldom a day that you won't. And then January, February, you can bank on pretty much
beautiful.
sun. Yeah, sun. So it's more like now, for example. Like tomorrow, we may not get a shower of rain at all, but today we had heavy rain. So like it's these kind of months where you're not 100% sure what's it going to do. Although one thing that it never ceases to amaze me, because Easter obviously changes. It's not a fixed festival, but it nearly always seems to rain Semana Santa, no matter what the story is, or no matter when it falls. Maybe I'm missing one or two Semana Santas.
Well, but it is usually in April, isn't it? And we do say Abril lluvias mil.
Yeah.
So that's part of it, I think.
Okay, but coming back to dress as well, though, or clothes, because when the sun is shining here, because I usually have a little bag with me anyway, like a school bag type bag. So my jacket will be in that. Because when the sun is shining here, like I'll sweat. I am an Irishman, so very much from temperate climate. But people here who just go around with a jacket on 24/7, regardless of the weather, I just find that rather intense.
I'm amazed at people that wear jumpers on the coast. You'd be down at Cartagena, somebody's got a sweater on and jeans.
Okay, well, yeah, I don't know how to do that. Or wearing a suit in the coast, but yeah, that's another thing. Or it reminds me of this old man from my village back home in Ireland, where he just wore the same clothes for the whole year, regardless. It didn't matter if it was December 21st and snowing, or June 21st, longest day of the year, and a lot of heat about. He just wore the same clothes all the time. But that's what a lot of Bogotanos, in my experience, they seem to. Especially the older folks too, with the old woolen ponchos too. That they'll have them on kind of 24/7. It seems. Richard as well, as I said, we should invite him on as another host here. But to Richard, he said it always seemed to rain on a Sunday, regardless of the season. I can't say I've experienced that.
Yeah, no, he's surprisingly right there, I think.
Okay.
I get what he's saying. There seems to be a little bit of doubt in that comment, doesn't there? That he says it seemed to. But I have to say, I often find with the dogs that Sunday afternoon walks are often rainy. Okay.
But anyway, so kind of coming back, what to expect. So October, November, expect rain and a lot of it. And I want to get to hailstones in a second, but that's kind of separate. And then January, February, expect a lot of sun. The other months could be mix and match. But the one thing here you will notice is August, and leading up to August, you'll have a whole lot of kites for sale all over the city because it's the windy month. And I do like a bit of wind, I must say, and it isn't windy enough for me in this city at times. Especially when maybe one is slightly hungover. So on those very rare occasions, twice a year, when I might be hungover, having a grey day and a strong wind, that's what I like, and not much sun. But August is the windy month when everybody, Bogotá and its mother, seems to buy a kite to go flying. Have you got involved in the kite flying around August, September?
I haven't, but I do come across a lot of kite flying people, that's for sure, because when we're out walking, the dogs really are fascinated by seeing somebody throwing up a kite. So So that's always interesting. Yeah, no, it is odd. I've never really heard of there being a windy season. I mean, I guess we do have more wind in certain seasons back home, do we? I guess we do. I mean, I always think about it coming along with rain and along with cold.
Yeah, you said it kind of when it gets windy here in Bogota, that signals that there's going to be a change in the weather.
Oh, there's often heavy winds just before. Yeah, there's a little bit of a changing in the prevailing weather. Yeah, that's definitely true. What I'm always amazed at here is though that it often doesn't wind. We don't often have wind and rain at the same time. So, rain in Bogota can just come straight down, like literally dead down. So if you're standing just under a tiny, minuscule little overhang, then you can be absolutely shielded from rain. Like it just won't come in at an angle like it often does, back on our islands.
Well, mentioning that, because this will be my first weather woe story, or woe betide, in Bogota. The first and only wedding that I went to here. And it was outside the city, but there was a meeting point for guests to be picked up in a minibus, and it was at Alcalá, Transmilenio station Alcalá. God, now I'd be pushed to remember what time of the year the wedding was. Maybe it was November, end of year time. Can't remember exactly. But anyway, we meet there, and of course, a lovely sunny day at the start, and we get to the meeting point, and a few people are there as well, and all going to the wedding. I arrived on my own, so I didn't know these other people, but obviously all dressed to the nines, so they're waiting for the wedding. And then, of course, cloud rolling in. This looks like could get dodgy, but we'll be okay. We're under the bridge. If it does rain, we'll be fine. Now, it's not really. It's more a residential area around Alcalá, so there aren't many shops or anything that you can go into. So there wasn't any. But then, within seconds, an absolute downpour of hailstones as well. Now, it wasn't the most intense hailstones I've seen, and I know you've experienced very bad hailstones, but still, like, it didn't matter. Now, obviously, under the Transmilenio bridge, there's gaps in that metal bridge anyway, so it's not completely impermeable to water. But there was just nowhere we could go. Everybody got absolutely, like, the street was turned into a little stream, so it was coming up.
No one was wearing their wellies for the wedding.
No, unfortunately not. I thought I was going to. I was thinking about bringing my wellies, but unfortunately I went against it. Absolutely soaked, like so bad that two of the guests just, because obviously with that absolute downpour, our minibus got delayed, because as you know, Ollie, when there's heavy rain here, that messes up the traffic here, because streets do basically turn into rivers. And yeah, two of the guys just, no, we're not going to the wedding. Like they had completely taken all the enthusiasm out of them. A few of us anyway decided, no, we'll stick it out. Got to the wedding venue, which was out, as I said, maybe about an hour outside Bogota in some kind of country resort. And thankfully there were some hand dryers, so a lot of us were going there, like taking off our shoes and our socks with hand dryers. And, yeah, I tell you, well, the whiskey went down well to a point at that wedding. I have to say later on that
is insane.
But you've had a kind of hailstone incident as well in Bogota, or the greater environs, haven't you? Yeah,
those. Well, actually, once at the. I know this is a different story, but once at the Bogota post offices, I was doing a little bit of work, and there was sort of, we started having cracks in the ceiling and stuff coming through. That was, I think 4 or 5 years ago, we had that enormous hailstorm in Galerías, where the old office was. And it just literally collapsed. It was so heavy that it just collapsed the roof of the flat above, and they got completely drenched. And then, of course, it passed through to us. And I mean, yeah, it's astonishing, isn't it, when you get these winter wonderland scenes suddenly in Bogota. But once I was out cycling near to Sopó, coming back around through Sopó and back into Bogota, and not too far off the autopista, it really started hammering down. And when I say really started hammering down, I mean, I'm golf ball style things that were actually sort of my hands on the handlebars started to bleed and get cut. So I've got like kind of, it's like I'm being scratched by the cat. There's blood appearing all over the shop. So I had to shelter under a tree for quite a while, of course, dressed in 3 millimeters of lycra. So it's not ideal, clothing, as we said before. Managed to get my way to one of the tiendas along the way, where they, to be fair, gave me free. They refused to take my money for the coffee. They put a blanket around me, and suggested I should just get a bus back and, come back for my bike. But I really didn't fancy the idea, so I struggled the way back. But my God, that was a horrific journey back, just everything cold, freezing, dripping wet. And as I was coming back on the very final leg, there was one nice bit, which was coming through La Calera, just beyond La Calera, between La Calera and the reservoir there, San Mateo. Coming back through there, absolutely wonderful. It was like being back home in winter, just all the fields completely white. Really lovely.
Yeah, amazing. Now, I've never been in the countryside to see that. Well, like whenever I've experienced hailstones, it's always been here in Bogotá in the city. But it's true, like when you do get that white, it's kind of the only winter scene that you'll get. Unfortunately, not really snowman building stuff, or that you can be firing snowballs around at people. It's not that type, obviously. It's hail, so it's not the most attractive. But you mentioned as well, like if we're comparing with our home countries, that the month that does kind of correspond with home would be October, because you'll get the rain, you'll get the grey days, and obviously here the sun always sets more or less around 6 p.m. and of course that's what we'll be getting in the UK and Ireland. So October's kind of that corresponding, that in October in Ireland or in the UK, October in Bogotá could almost be similar in
it's kind of, it's warmer here, definitely.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily feel that way. It feels cold because you're suddenly getting all this rain and stuff. I would say though that actually one of the things I really like about Bogotá compared to back home, we don't really have those grey days. They come by usually. This year's been a bit of an exception. But I'd say usually a fully grey day, you're only getting sort of 5, maybe 6 times a year in Bogotá. Normally, at least once in a day, there'll be, a few glimmers of sunlight.
Yeah, exactly. Like even today, I woke up and it was a bit dull, and then it started raining just before midday, and it stayed. I think it lasted until about 2 or 3. But then I went out for a long walk, and like it kind of brightened up a little bit. There was glimmers, it wasn't exactly full sunshine, but it did brighten up a little bit. Now I have to say though, and shame on me for not checking in the last couple of hours on the comments on Facebook where we shared what we were going to be talking about, and we have to say there was a lot of interaction. I think most people were getting their thoughts out on the comments, and unfortunately not here on the show where we like to get them. But the consensus seemed to be, now obviously when I posted it in the expats in Bogotá group, well, you're talking to the converted, perhaps people who are already in Bogotá, but even in the expats in Colombia, so that's countrywide, a lot of people were like, no, like the Bogotá weather is fine, it's kind of hits, as I call it, it's the Goldilocks location. It hits a sweet spot for people, like not too hot, not too cold. I'm not averse. People might find this strange. Like I do not mind the hot weather. Now, maybe to live there, and somebody made the point, actually, Melissa Fabregas, or McCarthy, as she is now married, she may be listening. She said she usually has it on in the background, so if you are Melissa, hi. But she did make the point, another bonus for Bogotá with its weather is that, like, all those annoying insects that you get in the hotter climes. Now, on the rare occasion, it hasn't happened to me in my new abode here, but in the previous one, there were a couple of nights when I got that annoying buzz in the middle of the night. So you do get the odd mosquito, but it is the very odd mosquitoes. So that is another advantage.
Yeah. No, I hear that, Brendan. I do hear that, and I would have agreed with you until about 2 years ago. But there appear to be a family of mosquitoes somewhere in my apartment that I can't kind of track down and kill fast enough. And so I've been being bit for the past 2 years, more or less, which in some ways is okay in terms of like, I'm like you know how mosquitoes kind of go off people that are local to them. So I don't feel the bites anymore. Like sometimes I notice I've got a mosquito bite. I think I've got another one like here now. And I kind of go, all right, it's another mosquito bite. I didn't even feel it. I don't feel the itchiness. But what does get me is that, like you say, when you're trying to sleep at night,
yeah, it's horrible. You just can't. You can't.
I always
sleep.
think I'd rather just cut myself and put out a little saucer of blood for them. I don't mind. I don't mind them taking my blood necessarily. You know, they've got to live, but.
Yeah, well, as long as they're not transmitting diseases, as long as they're safe. If they take a test before they take my blood, if they've got a pass, we should have a mosquito pass.
Well, at least we're high enough up for that. But let's come back to that idea. I mean, like, yeah, that is definitely a plus. And I think I've got to say, look, everybody says Medellin, city of eternal spring. Now, if you're coming in from Spain, especially southern Spain, I can absolutely see, you could imagine that, city of eternal spring, Medellin, what is it, 20 degrees, give or take, year round. Yeah, a little shade over 20. Never gets that hot, never gets that cold, boom, eternal spring. Although I've had a jumper on in Medellin, I would say. However, I would say, coming not from the south of Spain, but instead coming from damp England, even with the Bristol microclimate, I would definitely say Bogotá is much like a British summer.
Yeah, and if it's like a British summer, then it's like one of the best ever Irish summers. No, and that's what I always say. The only difference that we have is the change in daylight hours. And I still miss it in some regards. Like I don't mind those dark, dreary days leading up to Christmas because, well, and then Christmas was I do mind them, but Christmas was always kind of in there, and I was kind of more of a Christmas enthusiast when I was back home. I'm less of an enthusiast here, I have to say, but it was that kind of like beacon of light in the dark or whatever. But then, yeah, the longer days too. I don't know. I guess the change was maybe something that you kind of moved to the change. Whereas here it's just that standard 12 hours of sun and 12 hours of nighttime, really. Now, but you mentioned.
Hang on. So you wouldn't. I mean, obviously, we all like the long days. I think that's taken as a given. But being as the long days have got to have the short days along with them, that's part of the deal. You see, because I quite like. I agree with you. I lose track of the year, basically, because I don't know nothing's ever changing. And I find it's hardest, actually, at this time of year, you know, coming into June. It's around sort of mid-June that I think, hang on, why are the days not getting longer? I always find those are the bits that affect me the most. But, yeah, I kind of think, I always think, yeah, okay, I'd like longer days, June, July, August, yeah, okay, nice. But then I always think, yeah, you know, February and January and November and especially November, they're just so miserable in Britain that I actually, that's too much of a downside for me. It doesn't compensate for the longer days.
The one kind of qualifier I'd put on that is that when you do get the snow, and unfortunately in Ireland it's a rare enough occurrence, and maybe that's why then I like it, because it is so rare. And a lot of the time when I was growing up, it was more February we'd get the snow and the old school days off and stuff like that, maybe, you know, well, hey, school is closed. Yeah, that was kind of a little bit, if I can use the word magical back then, especially in my school days, because, yeah, you'd have your day off school, you'd build snowmen, you'd have snowball fights and things like that. So maybe that's the element. But I know what you're saying about the actual, like, just the darkness and the depression maybe that brings along.
Dreary, yeah.
Yeah.
Funny
yeah,
what you say about snow though, isn't it? I mean, I know what you mean. I do miss snow. Doesn't everyone miss snow? I mean, snow's great, but it's like you say, you don't want snow all the time, do you?
Yeah, I guess if you're saying this to somebody who lives in Canada, they're kind of going, "What? I'm sick of
Well,
snow."
to be fair, I think they get so much snow that they don't mind it. Do you know what I mean? I always think Britain's in the worst position there. If you go to somewhere like Helsinki, they just kind of go, "Oh yeah, there's absolutely tons of snow everywhere. We just walk across it. There's so much we have to put chains on our car wheels and stuff like that." But of course, you can't really do that in England because the cost would just be massively disproportionate to how much snow. But it does mean that when we get snow, it is invariably snow chaos paralyzes Britain.
Yeah, well, exactly. And the same with Ireland, like those bad winters we had 2009, 2010. Both islands were, as you said, paralysed, like flights delayed. And of course, with England and London, that was an international disaster. And the Yanks and the Russians and everyone else were going, why can't Heathrow deal with this little bit of snow? What the hell has happened to international aviation just because there's a little bit of snow in London? But it is true, I guess, when you're not used to it. But so I guess all in all, then, Ollie, you prefer the climate here than you do.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. And I find it really weird when Colombians say to me, Bogotá, the weather is so terrible. And it is interesting, so many people defended it earlier on Facebook. But I often hear Colombians saying, the weather is so terrible, especially Colombians from other parts of the country. The weather's so terrible in Bogotá. And I think, what are you talking about? It's great. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and like, even though at times I do long for a bit more heat, and the advantage, we've talked about this in previous episodes when we're talking about quick getaways from Bogotá or whatever, you only have to go really an hour in any direction outside of Bogotá and you'll get to a warmer climate. So
as long as you go down, yeah.
Well, yeah, as long as you're going downhill, of course. But so you can get that in such a short area and in the country in general. I mean, if I was, if I do miss snow that much, well, I could go to try and get up to one of the snow-capped mountains and hang out there for a day or two. But yeah, so like it all in all, I think it's a fair climate here, because you even do, to talk again about my liking for the sun, there are days when it's not really a sunbathing city, to be honest, but you could do it.
Why not? I mean, you'll get sunburnt easily enough.
Yeah, because you're that bit closer to the sun.
I don't understand that, actually. I mean, I guess it's to do with the thinning of the atmosphere. But it seems to me really weird that the sun is however many, God knows how many light years away, and yet 2.5 kilometers seems to be all the difference in the world.
Yeah, obviously it's not to do with closeness, but that's what people say. It must be to do with the air being thinner. It would have to do that. I think our producer is telling us that we have to vacate the building here, the virtual Bogotá Nights studio. Time is almost up. Well, guys, I hope you can stay warm tonight on this chilly Bogotá evening, and we'll be back in a week's time and closer to a more open Bogotá as well, which is coming on the 8th of June. But until next week, guys, ciao, ciao, and goodbye,
ciao.
Ali.